Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to Money in the Morning, aka Economic Elevation, aka Financial Consciousness. My name is Dr. Boyce Watkins, and I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope you're feeling good. I think today I may end up having to finish up early just because my wife decided that right during class was the perfect time to have furniture delivered. And so I'm gonna have to go upstairs and talk to the furniture people because she's doing something. And so it's chaos, right? Chaos in the house, but you get through it all with teamwork, right? That's what they say. So anyway, I hope everybody's feeling good. I hope that you're having a great day. I know I'm feeling good, and it is. And I was in the 6 a.m. club this morning, but I didn't go to the gym. I only go to the gym every other day. But I have been hydrating and stuff like that, so that's been pretty cool. Another quick reminder: don't forget we're going to South Africa in May. So if you want to join us in South Africa, it's going to be an epic trip. You feel free to go to b1voyages.com. That's b1voyages.com. And also, Dr. Alicia's doing a healing retreat in Costa Rica in December. And so if you want to join us for that, feel free. She's going to lead that. I'm just going to tag along and help out and do some special sessions to support what my wife is working on, right? So fellas, make sure you support your wife when she's got goals and dreams so that her dreams matter as well. All right, so let's hop in and let's talk about some stuff that was on my mind. Now, first thing is just in case you want to know what's happening with the stock market and this war. It looks like the market's just kind of brushing it off. In fact, wait, you know what? Let me change this again. It looks like the price of oil has risen. It started off okay this morning, but now we're down 400 points. That's significant. It's not a disaster, but it is significant. They keep telling us it's not going to be a forever war, but unfortunately, history contradicts that. And also, there is, in terms of economic issues on the horizon that we can be concerned about, there is an issue with private credit. Basically, private credit is a lot of the lending that's happening where companies are borrowing money, but they're not borrowing money from banks. And a lot of these private credit deals are private crap deals. And so the interest rates are insanely high. And these companies, if they're shaky or if they start to default, then that could be a black swan event for the economy. Black swan event is an event that you didn't see coming because a lot of this debt is not on the balance sheet, right? So this is why Jamie Dimon, the head of JP Morgan Chase, one of the biggest banks in the world, actually said that, or he compared them to like roaches under your refrigerator or something like that. He used the roaches analogy, and I said, yeah, that's actually a pretty good analogy. So you do have some issues on the horizon, but there's always an issue on the horizon. There's always in every situation, there's always what you call the bull case and the bear case. So if you look at a stock, there's a reason it could go up, there's a reason it could go down, and you want to be aware of all that, right? That's part of financial consciousness. Now, last night, a lot of you were with us when we were reading Marcus Garvey in his book Message to the People. We did our Powernomics training last night. We do this every Wednesday, and he talked about some basic things when it comes to money, primarily living below your means. Just not putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be living with a deficit. You should live with a surplus. So you don't want to imitate the US government. Your goal should be definitely to have a surplus because the surplus accumulates and that's how you build wealth. That's all wealth is. All wealth is having more stuff than other people. And the only way you can have more stuff than other people is if you do like my wife is doing upstairs, which is she's accumulating furniture. So when the guy came in the house and he's like, I got all this stuff that your wife wants put in the house. Where are you going to put it? I said, I have no idea. I like our furniture, right? But I can live like a college frat boy and be okay. My wife is the one who has all the taste, so she just ordered all this stuff, and I'm like, I had no idea. Then he's like, well, what do you want us to do with the old furniture? I don't know, man. Put it in the garage. So we're accumulating stuff. So my wife, that just do like my wife and accumulate, except instead of accumulating furniture, accumulate stocks and bonds and real estate and assets and business ownership and things like that, and cash and whatever. And then you'll be wealthy, right? And remember, wealth isn't just the money, the accumulation of money. Over time, you accumulate wisdom, you accumulate intellect, you accumulate emotional intelligence, all these things, right? And that all these things create a wealthy life. And that's really the main goal. Now, let me go into something I saw today. It was a really disturbing video, actually, and it has to do with money and love. You guys know I wrote a book called Financial Lovemaking years ago, and the subtitle is Merging Assets with Your Partner in Ways That Feel Good. And the reason I wrote this book is because I was really intrigued when I was on the faculty of Syracuse. I was super intrigued by how money changes things in relationships. I was really intrigued by how financial security was so important for men and women for different reasons. A lot of men define their masculinity based on what their ability to provide and things like that. A lot of women really seem to have a big issue with financial instability, financial insecurity. I interviewed a lady who told me that her husband, she was saving, her spare change or her extra money to put her daughter through college, and her husband was going right behind her and grabbing money out of the bucket and using it for lunch. And she was so mad, and she said, I told my husband, I said, you literally ate and shit out our daughter's education. You literally ate and shit out our daughter. That's how she said it. I didn't mean to cuss in front of the babies if you brought your kids, but that's what she said, and I'm just quoting her. And I remember noticing how mad she was. She was so mad at him, and I said, man, this is deep. This is interesting. I've heard women talk about their husband cheating, and they didn't sound as mad as she sounded. So the long story, the long and short of it is that money matters in relationships. There's also numerous studies that show that healthy relationships are one of the hacks when it comes to wealth. This is why relationship management is something that you should train on consciously, right? Remember, you spend 4 years going to school to learn how to get that job. I would spend a year studying how to keep that woman, keep that man, keep that family, build that life that you want. For example, there's studies that show that married people earn 26% more income than regular people. Research analyzing U.S. household data found that married individuals earn 26% more, and they also hold roughly 35% more net worth. Your probability of having a surplus in your household is higher when you have a stable family. Married households have far higher net worths. We mentioned that. Ohio State University, that's where I got my doctorate, they did a study and found that after 10 years of marriage, couples had an average net worth that was about $43,000 compared with $110,000. Sorry, I said 100. Saying the numbers wrong. 11,000 for people who were single, 43,000 for people who were married. So 4 times higher. That's what I was trying to say. I'm sorry, I said it wrong. And you can keep on going. It's not to say everybody should get married. It's really to say that doing things as a group. It makes things much easier than doing it as an individual, because for various reasons that I could literally explain to you mathematically, you're more at risk when you have one person that's living paycheck to paycheck than you are if you have multiple people, two, maybe three, if the kids are included, that have some sort of a surplus and a financial cushion, right? All the different statistical ways that you could be destroyed financially, they grow exponentially when you're doing it by yourself relative to doing it as part of a group. So a lot of the journey in life, in my opinion, is finding some group that you can be a part of, and participating in that group and picking the right group, picking the right people to have kids with, the right people to bring into your life, right? Which requires consciousness, because we know that one of the things about love and sex is that it's not a logical process. It's very emotionally driven, and we meet somebody, we think they're cute. Next thing you know, they're ruining our lives because we've let a virus into our body and our mind and our soul and our lives, right? Which is kind of a scary thought. So anyway, with that being said, let me go back and play this video. This is really interesting. And then I'll explain why. So here it goes. All right. So this is me talking for a second, but just ignore me, because that's me at 6 in the morning. But watch the lady. She's more interesting than me. Here it goes. Video to be very disturbing, because it makes me wonder what the future is for Black families and relationships. Check it out.
I was just sitting here thinking about how I went to singles night at church, and it was hundreds. I mean, at least 1,000. First, I thought it was 500, but the pastor said it was 1,000 singles in attendance. Like, are we all living the same life at this point? Because I've never been in a room with that many single people. I even thought that it was I thought I was like the only one left. I mean, beautiful women, all types, shapes and sizes, literally African-American women. Like, a room full of singles. And I'm like, this has to be an experiment. Like, this has to be like assimilation. Is that the word I want to use? I think so. Like, I'm confused, and I'm like low-key, like nervous, like for us. We're shit for myself, fuck y'all. Because where are the men? Where are the men? Then again, don't know. Never mind. Don't. We know where they at. Bye.
I found this video to be very Okay. disturbing. Okay, so I want to ask y'all a question. Give me a yes or no if you've ever seen anything like that. I'd be curious to know if anybody's ever been a part of something where it seemed a little bit out of balance, or maybe she's making it up. Maybe it's just her unique experience. Angela says no. Tequila says yes. Okay, Steven says I have. Cheryl says I have. Candace says no. James says no. Linda says no. Kim says yes. Janet says yes. Okay, so this is a mixed bag, right? This is a very mixed bag. Some of you have had that experience. Some of you have not. I can tell you this. My wife did. My wife is she's a relationship optimist. When we were friends back in the day, every girlfriend that I ever had that she ever met, she would always say, "Oh my God, Boyce, you two should be married," right? And so, and I would just joke. I said, "I don't think you're really saying that I should marry that person. You just love the idea of love, right?" She just loved the idea of people being in love, and she's a hopeless romantic in that way. Whereas when I married her, I told her flat out, I said, "Look, I don't know if I would have gotten married. I married you because you're you, not because I just really felt I woke up one day and said I have to be married. I have many opportunities to get married. I just, you get enough money, it's easy to get married, right? So the point was to say though that with that said, I remember she did an event in Atlanta. There was a speed dating singles kind of thing. And I said, well, I don't know. I said, from what I'm hearing in Atlanta, the dating market's a little bit skewed. And she's again, because she's optimistic. She's like, no, there's somebody for everybody. I'm like, okay, well, there's somebody for everybody. You go do it, girl. I'm gonna support you. And she did this event. There were 27 women and 3 men, and two of the men were one of them was very unattractive. The other one was probably married. And so there was one guy who was holding court, who was literally sitting there having a conversation with about 6 women, and and she came back and she was so shocked. And I said, "Yeah, I said you got to go spend some time in these streets. I kind of feel like there's some stuff happening. There might be some truth to that." Now, again, I don't think that's everyone's experience, right? I think that is it's mixed. It's mixed. But here's what was interesting to me, and this relates to wealth and family because I told you family is the key to wealth, actually. And so when they destroyed the black family, that was one of the tools used to destroy black wealth. Like it was definitely completely linked. And in fact, the lowest median net worth in America is a single black mother with children, and also a destabilized, disrupted family. That's disrupted through violence or bad relationships is also going to destroy wealth because your kids aren't going to be assets, they're going to be liabilities, they're going to be out in the streets doing only God knows what, right? So here are some things that you might want to think about. Now notice she was talking about church, and here's what I thought about. I'm gonna tell on myself, and I've mentioned this quickly, and I'm gonna be very brief about it because I feel awkward talking about my own life in this way. I was engaged years before I was engaged to my wife. I was engaged to a really nice woman who was really big about going to church. She was Seventh-day Adventist. I completely respected it. She went to church several times a week, and I was okay with that. I've never ever felt the need to tell anybody how to live their life. As long as you don't tell me how to live mine, then I say live and let live. I support you. If I care about you, I'm gonna support you. Well, her church didn't seem to like it very much. They seemed to, and it was very what's the word confusing to me because they almost dealt with it like she was dating, like you would have thought she was dating Pookie the crackhead or some guy that's murders people for a living, and no, I was just a regular guy who really liked this woman, and I just didn't want to go to church, right? And so I remember her feeling a lot of pressure to not to pick a man inside the church. And so I went to church with her one Saturday because they go to church on Saturday. If you know anything about Seventh-day Adventists, that's when they go to church. Who knows? Maybe they're the ones who have it right. And I went to church with her on a Saturday, and I looked around at the men that were actually in the church. Okay. And so I remember I saw the choir director, and I really honestly, I ain't gonna lie, I kind of wondered if he actually liked girls. The choir director, you know what I'm talking about. Girl, you know what I'm talking about. and, uh, and then I saw another guy who I think was literally about 5'2". I'm not kidding. That's how tall he really was. I don't think he was like dwarf height, but he was not tall. And um and then I saw like another guy who was married, and that was it. I didn't see a lot of men. Like if I was in a male competition, with other masculine males, I wouldn't have felt any competition. It's like, okay, there's no dudes here. And I've seen this happen. I've seen this in a lot of places. In fact, the studies show this, and this is what's interesting. I promise you, I'm gonna get to a point here. Um, and did you know that there's something that they call the religious participation gap? So historically, women attend church far more than men. In many congregations, women make up roughly 55 to 65% of the attendees, and a lot of the men that are there are there with their wives, right? This creates a basic supply and demand problem. And also, a lot of here's another thing too. This is something that I really think should be explored. I'm not telling anybody what to do, but it's really interesting when you have pastors that overstep religious boundaries and start telling you how to live your life, right? I get it if you're telling me how to get to God, but when you're telling me what to do with my money, what to do with my relationships, what to do with my politics. That's a slippery slope. And a lot of churches tell me, give me a yes if you've seen this. There are a lot of churches, a lot of pastors that tell the congregation, which is mostly women that are following their advice, that are sitting there taking notes. I remember I dated, I ain't gonna lie, I had a couple of girlfriends. I wasn't no big time player, but I dated, and it was all black women. I never dated a woman who wasn't black. And I remember going to church because, you'd be trying to make a good impression. And I remember going to church with one lady and she was taking notes. We went down to visit many years ago. We went to visit the church of Pastor Jeremiah Wright that the Obamas used to attend. And I remember her telling me, she said, "Yeah, this is the who's who church. Oprah goes to this church, and this is where all the prominent black people in Chicago. It's called Trinity." And at that time, no one knew who Barack Obama was. That's how long ago it was. But the Obamas, I think, at that time were in who knows, Barack could have been sitting right next to me. I wouldn't have known it. And she was in there, like up in church, taking notes, right? And I was like, wow, like this is really serious. So here's the thing: you got the women in the front row taking notes, listening to a man who's got a tremendous amount of power and influence because powerful spiritual men are, for whatever reason, very charismatic. And they're saying you should not date a man who does not go to church. Let me tell you why that sends spidey senses off for me. Did you know that the Mormons, the old school polygamous Mormons, where they would have like 40, 50 wives, that's what they would tell their women too. They would say, you can't be with a man who isn't approved by me, right? You can't, and so what would happen is when they would have these big compounds, the pretty girls would grow up. And when the girls got about 13, 14, and they start to hit puberty, and the boys are 13, 14, they hit puberty, the girls are want to date the boys. So what these old nasty men would do is they would run the boys off. They would tell the boys, you got to go. But if a girl tried to leave and she says, well, I want to leave too, I want to leave with Chad, they would go chase the girl down and bring her back to the compound, right? They're like, no, 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 you're our property. You stay here. He's got to go. Well, this is Animal Kingdom. I mean, you could go watch the Nature Channel and see this. This is men running off male competition. Like I'm 65 years old and I wanna date the teenagers still, and I can't compete with the young hunky guy who has big muscles when he takes his shirt off. So I'm gonna get rid of him so that I can have this to myself. And if you don't think that happens in the black community, then you ain't been black for very long because pimping is everywhere. You see pimping all the time, right? So I'm not saying every pastor's a pimp. This is not me saying that. It's me saying that at the end of the day, it's hard to imagine when you talk about something as valuable as your life, you allowing your life to be shaped in all your decisions, these really important decisions about who you marry, who you have kids with, what you do, in other areas, to be controlled by what somebody tells you, right? So here's what this is verifiable fact. A lot of churches, particularly conservative churches, evangelical churches, this is white people too, not just black people. A lot of women are frequently taught that you must marry a godly man, someone who is equally yoked. And so what it translates into is that you avoid men who don't attend church. So men are already less likely to attend. So what that does is that from a supply and demand, remember I'm speaking as an economist here. From a supply and demand standpoint, what you're doing is you are reducing the supply and the demand is through the roof. You're ovulating and your body's saying, okay, it's time for me to, you're thinking that you just want to have sex, but really it's your body saying, no, it's time for you to reproduce, girl. Come on, let it chop, chop. And there's not anybody around for that. or the men that maybe you meet outside the church, maybe you do get with those guys, but you're not thinking like, okay, this can be my husband because it's not acceptable because I can't present this man to the pastor. And that's interesting because studies also show that there is a low and declining pool of males that actually are interested in going to church, white, black. For decades, studies show that men attended church far less than women. This created a massive mismatch. So a lot of church-going women are looking for partners in the church, but they just really aren't there. And so the researchers and church leaders have openly discussed this imbalance, and the churches are trying to solve the problem, but they're solving it in the wrong way because what they're trying to do is they're trying to solve the problem with an impossible constraint. See, I'm a mathematician too, right? And in mathematics we have something basically that says that the more constraints you put on a solution of a problem, the more suboptimal your solution is going to be. Let me explain that. That means that the more I shackle you in terms of how you can solve the problem, the more I say, you can solve the problem, but you can only look here. You can't look outside the box. You can't think outside the box. You got to be in the box. The more I tell you to solve a problem in the box, the worse your answer is going to be because you're contorting yourself into this really awkward way of solving a really difficult, complex problem. And everything in my being tells you that you're better at solving your problems when you can break away from any unnecessary constraints on how you find the solution. So maybe that means, girl, you better go find your man and find a good one wherever you got to go. Don't let somebody else tell you how to do that because 20 years later, when your life hasn't turned out to be what you want it to be, that those people are not going to be around anymore. They're gone. They won't even remember giving you that advice, right? So basically ultimately, a lot of studies show that certain cultural rules can really delay relationship formation. Churches that emphasize strict sexual morality, like no sex before marriage, strict gender roles, etc., can make dating requirements more rigid because you're putting more constraints on solving the problem. In a lot of communities, it raises the threshold of what counts as an acceptable partner. And in fact, it's not just on the female side. I used to mentor this poor kid at Syracuse, and I remember he was very religious, and I remember him. I met him. I saw him again when he was like 28. And because I'd been kind of like the faculty advisor of a group. I forgot what the group was called, but that's what I did. And so he's really smart. And I talked to him again. He called me when he was about 27, 28 years old. And he told me he met this nice lady that he liked. And I said, okay, so how's it going? And he said, well, I couldn't be with her. And I said, well, what happened? He said, well, I thought that she was a godly woman. I said, well, okay, well, what happened? And he said, well, we would get together and we would pray together every day. And I thought that she was pure. And I was like, well, what is pure? What does that mean? Because I wanted to tell him, I was like, I don't think most women are really pure. They just kind of make give you that impression, but you know, no, it's I'm you know what I'm telling you. I'm not going to say it, right? And so he said, I thought she was pure, and we would pray together. And then my buddy came to me and he said, man, I have to tell you something. And he said, what? And he said, your girl that you've been praying with every day, who you've been telling that you can't sleep with her because you want purity. He said, twice a week, me and her get together, and I knock the brakes off that lady's body parts, if you know what I mean, right? They would get together and do what humans do when they're attracted to each other, right? So his of course his friend's devastated. Of course this poor kid, he's shocked. He's like, oh my God, and I was so heartbroken because I thought she was so pure. And I said, dude, I said, look, I said this girl liked you. I said the only reason she was with this guy is because you're trying to maintain something that I don't think was consistent with her biology. Right? So she really wanted you, but you know that song, if you can't love the one you want, you got to love the one you with. Am I moving too fast? Just the same. Hey baby, what's your name? I'd like to get to know you. Cause darling, I just can't wait no more. Oh, that was a great song in the 80s. Anyway, so the point of the matter is to say that I remember just thinking, I said, dude, get rid of this whole purity thing. I said, she is, I said, go read a book on biology about women's bodies. When they hit about 28, 29 years old, they're hitting peak fertility stage. That means that their body is screaming for male attention, if you know what I mean. And it's not dirty. It's not impure. It's the most beautiful thing known to man, which is reproduction. Like, your body's saying, okay, let's continue the gene pool. Let's have a baby. Right. So for him, because he'd been taught that this was dirty and bad and nasty, it's like he was like, no, we can't do this because I'm like, yeah, well, that's why she's hanging out with your homeboy because Mother Nature ain't gonna is not gonna contort itself into whatever rules that you claim to believe in. It's just not going to. It's gonna happen. Life will find a way, as they said in Jurassic Park. All right. So anyway, with that said, here let's get back to this, so I don't start talking about crazy stuff. All right, which I'm probably 10 miles past crazy by now. But here's the thing. So here are if you want to know why men don't go to church as much as women. There's research on this. They find number one, males tend to take more risk and they have lower what they call existential caution. So psychologists have found that women tend to be more risk averse. Risk averse, that's it's also a financial term. That means women just women, because we have testosterone, it kind of makes us crazy and it makes us fight and jump off buildings or whatever. Women don't have as much, I think, and it's not to say women can't be brave. Women are very brave. I mean, just childbirth alone is an amazing process, but men and women are different in that way, and they say women tend to be a little more risk averse and more cautious. So a lot of researchers argue that what happens is that this shows itself in religious beliefs. So religious belief can act as a kind of insurance against existential risks like death or moral punishment. And in fact, I remember I had a friend. Well, she was like a friend with benefits way back in the day. Don't tell Alicia. And I remember she was trying to get me to come to church, and I said, well, I don't really want to because I want to sleep in and football's on Sunday. And she was like saying, well, you should come to church and profess the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. No disrespect. Like my mama was all into that for sure. And my daddy's a pastor. Both of my daddies were pastors, actually, drug addicts and pastors. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, she said, here's what she said to me that was really interesting. She said, well, I said, well, I don't really know what happens after you die. Like, I don't, I'm trying to process that. And she said, well, what if there's just like a 1% chance that you could go to hell? Like, wouldn't you want to go to church just in case that 1% is true? Right? Like almost like an insurance policy. Like, hey, why don't you just do it just in case it's right? And I said, well, but still though, that would mean I have to miss all the football games. So the answer is no. But still, it was like I remember having that conversation, and the conversation was almost like an insurance conversation, right? Like if someone says, I don't want to get insurance on my house because I'm okay with taking the risk, and someone says, well, there's only 1% chance that your house will burn down, but what if it does, right? Don't you want to be protected just in case? And that's logical, but it didn't quite fit with me because I'm okay with taking that chance. So with that said, though, there's also greater women have greater empathy and relational orientation than men do. So women are, studies show that the psychology of religion suggests that women tend to score higher on empathy and what they call mentalizing, the ability to think about others' emotions and intentions. So we can be dismissive jerks sometimes, and we have to. I think that's where men have to get in touch with our feminine side a little bit more, because the feminine naturally connects to other people. So a lot of religion emphasizes compassion, community care, moral relationships that align more closely with things women naturally connect to more so than men. Not to say men can't do it, but it's easier for women than it is for men. It's just this is what this research says. Also, socialization. A lot of sociologists argue that women are socialized to value nurturing morality and community connection. So churches historically function as community building spaces that reinforce these roles. Four, institutional culture of churches fits female participation patterns. Research shows that religious institutions frequently rely on activities that align with social bonding, volunteering, caregiving, and relational networks. Women have historically been more active in these types of social structures. Last but not least, workforce and time structure differences. So historically, this typically historically favored female participation. Women were typically less likely to work full time outside the home. That's changed, obviously. So studies have shown that people who spend more time in workplaces tend to show lower religious involvement. So the more time you spend at work, the less likely you are to go to church. While those with more time embedded in community structures participate more in church life. So ultimately, what I saw with this video, where the lady says she went to the church event, and there were 1,000 women and very few men. None of that really surprised me, and it really, if you think about things like wealth and family and the success of the black family in general, I still have to admit that I'm not really sure if the trade-off always makes sense to say, um, because I only believe I can meet a good man, a quality man in the church, I will pass up any man. I will automatically define any man outside the church to be low quality. And because I can tell you, I'm a guy. I didn't meet my wife at church. I didn't meet my wife at the club. I met my wife in the library, and that fits for us. We're equally yoked as professors. She's a scholar. I'm a scholar. We both got PhDs, so it was a fit. It worked, right? But and really the truth is, let's just be real. I mean, I don't think I would have wanted to meet my wife at the club. I didn't go to the club. Right. But I don't remember feeling like, well, I must meet my wife at the library. But at the same time, I get it though. I get it when religion's very important and you want people to participate in what you're doing, right? So maybe I can say I definitely wouldn't have wanted to marry a woman who didn't want to go to the library at all. But at the same time, I think if there were no women in the library, let's say that going to the library was only for whatever reason, theoretically, let's say that it was only a thing men like to do, and I'm really sort of balancing, like finding a wife with this constraint, I might say, well, maybe I don't need her to come to the library with me, but I need her to at least respect the fact that I like to go to the library. So I almost wonder, again, not telling anybody how to think about this, but I wonder, like, if you have a quality person who says, look, I'm not going to go to church with you, but I'm going to support and respect the fact that you like to go to church, right? And I'm gonna hear you out on your perspectives. Maybe that might work because a lot of times, church and politics, I think, unfortunately, can end up really dividing black families. I've met guys who go on dates, and some of them don't want to vote for the Democratic Party for whatever reason. And I've heard guys tell me that she refuses to date me because I won't be a Democrat. And I was like, wow. So she's gonna let the political party choose the father of her children. That's really powerful. That's heavy. That's heavy. Ain't nobody gonna tell me that I can't love that woman in that other room. Like, not no politician, not no pastor, not nobody, not even my parents. Right? So that to me is what's interesting. So if you want to know what I'm saying, the farthest I'll go in terms of my personal Uncle Boyce advice is to say, man, you better live your life the way you need to live it. So many people have other agendas, and you might think that they're giving you advice because they're trying to really help you, but really they're giving advice because it fits into the framework that they believe in, that they want you to fit into. And it's unfortunate because it can be used for extensive manipulation. Just another true life, real true story, true story. I knew a guy when I was back at University of Kentucky, and he was known for being an extreme womanizer. This guy, we would get together in the Black Student Union, and all he would talk about is all the girls he slept with. He was just nasty. Probably got all kinds of diseases and stuff. And I remember him. I talked to him like 10 years after college. I mean, it was years because I was on the faculty of Syracuse at the time, maybe early 30s. And I remember him saying, he said, "You know what the best place to meet women is?" I said, "Where?" He said, "Church." I said, "But you don't like church. You're not religious." He said, "It don't matter." And I said, I don't really know if I want to go to church because the football's on Sunday. And he said, "It's okay." He said, just go and just pretend. Like just wave your arms in the air, pretend like you catching the Holy Ghost. He said, those women will fall in love with you in 30 seconds flat. Right. And I remember specifically him saying that. And I said, wow, it would be interesting if other people kind of understood this. So again, I know it sounds like I'm talking about dating, but really I'm talking about family and wealth and community and all the things that tie back into this because again, all the studies show that it's easier to build wealth if you have help. Right? If I had a choice between being trained, if I had a choice between getting a degree in finance versus having a supportive spouse who helps me build wealth, I would take the supportive spouse who helps me build wealth over the degree in finance. I kid you not. Because it's one thing if you know what to do. It's another thing to help get somebody to help you do it. Do you understand the difference? Do we understand the difference? This is important too. We do know the difference between knowledge, talking, and action. Do we understand that? That there's like the ability to design a building, and then there's somebody that's gonna go help you lift the bricks and the concrete to build the damn thing. And when you're talking about family, you're talking about finding people that will help you build the institution that you're trying to create. You're talking about people that are going to go on the journey of developing the structure and doing the hard labor required over a long period of time to build legacy, wealth, family, and structure, and all these other things that you dream about. Because until somebody does the work, it's all theoretical and it's all a fantasy. And this is one of the big challenges when it comes to overcoming the wealth and the issue and all that stuff. We used to think it was all about knowledge and oh, with black people we just don't know and they hide the information from us and it's like no. There's plenty of people that have the solutions, plenty of people that are talking about it, but ain't nobody really sitting down and actually doing it. And then when you're doing it, I promise you, I can say this as a person. I literally sat there with my wife three minutes before class. It was probably 2 minutes because I was late and we were talking about how we were going to work together to solve a financial problem. She said, Boyce, the furniture's here that it's going to cost this much money. I said, you didn't tell me. Well, here's my wallet. It's got 10 credit cards in it. Pick one and pay the guy, right? We're doing this. We're solving a financial problem together. If I was doing this by myself or she was doing it by herself, it would be hard. In fact, that furniture would not be upstairs getting moved into the house if I wasn't here, because Big Daddy knows how to make a couple dollars, right? So the point of the matter is to say that teamwork really does make the dream work. And so I think that one of the parts of the journey in your wealth building process, just like starting a business, is to think of family and marriage just like you're starting a company. That's it. Think of it like I'm playing. I call myself Big Daddy. I'm just joking, I'm being silly. All right. Anyway, but really think of it like you're starting a business. If you start a business, ask yourself this question: is it easier for me to make this business succeed if I have teammates that I can delegate to, or if I'm doing all the work by myself? And I'm gonna tell you, this is why the trauma healing is so important, because one of the biggest trauma responses known to man is I'm gonna do it all by myself because I can't trust nobody. And the ability to operate and function in this world does require you to trust. And trust is hard because you're going to get burned. And part of your consciousness exercise has to be learning how to trust the right people to minimize the number of times you're going to get burned. You won't eliminate it. You're going to get burned. I get burned all the time. I've been burned. I'm going to be burned. I know it. I've already written it into the business model, but I know that I have to trust in order to get something done. Do you understand what I'm saying? And what you want ultimately when you're building, developing, getting things done is you have to make sure that you make the decisions well enough such that the good outweighs the bad. Like, yeah, I got burned 4 times, but the other 15 times it worked out great. So the pros outweighed the cons. And a lot of healthy functionality I find is the ability to get burned, but still stick with the plan. That's consciousness. See the bigger picture. Okay, this is the small picture. The small picture is I'm mad at you because you hurt my feelings and you screwed me or you stole my money. That's the small picture. And the temptation is that because I had this experience, I'm going to walk away and never try again, right? But seeing the bigger picture says, yeah, I got burned, but you know what? If I wasn't in the game, I wouldn't have a chance to win. So I got to stay in the game because this is the life I chose. This is the direction I'm going to go. And this is going to be really important for you also if you ever plan to do things like quit your job. When you choose to make your money as an entrepreneur, then you've made a decision. You're like, okay, this is the type of person I'm going to be. I'm about that life now, right? This is the game that I chose, right? And what happens is that when you run into a problem, which you always will, you're gonna say, okay, you know what? I'm an entrepreneur, so because I have this financial problem, I'm going to solve this financial problem as an entrepreneur. That means that as an entrepreneur, I'm going to create a product, market my product better, do a business partnership, cut some costs, right? I can't solve an entrepreneurship problem as if I were still an employee. Because an employee mind would say, oh, I better go get a job because I can get back to my old life and I'll be safe again. But that means you haven't fully made the commitment. You can't go into a new relationship with your new girlfriend and then say, I'm going to go back to my ex whenever I have a problem, because that's not going to work. You've moved on. This is your woman. She's going to bring problems just like the last one did. Hopefully, she'll bring fewer problems, but you don't even know that. You're taking a risk, you're making an investment. And now that you've made this decision, you know that you will fail and you will struggle, but your greatest probability of success is maximized by you sticking with the plan. You must stick with the plan. Think about the plan, process the plan, decide on the plan, and stick with the plan. That maximizes your chances of success, but it doesn't guarantee success. That's the scary part. There's no guarantees in this life, but you can impact your probabilities. Because I'm gonna tell you this. Bill Cosby said this 30 years ago on Arsenio. And I thought this was really profound. I remember him saying, he said, I don't know what the key to success is. He said, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody and be everything to everyone all the time, right? It's not knowing who you are. Right? He literally said that's how you fail because you're over here because this is working over here because that's working. And people invest like that sometimes. There are people who will just follow every fad, every trend. Oh, I used to be in crypto, but now I'm done with crypto. Now I'm going over to NFTs. I'm done with NFTs. Now I'm going to this. No, you pick your lane and you stay with it. Just like you pick your relationship, you stick with it. You pick your economic strategy, you stick with it. You pick your family, you stick with it. Then you go 10 toes down in that thing that you chose, and therefore you got the best chance to succeed. All right. So does that make sense? I hope that that makes sense. This was, in case you're not sure, this was an investing conversation because all investing really is pouring resources into something, hoping that you can get a desired result. That's what investing is. It ain't always got to do with money. Most of the time, money is nowhere in the building when you're making an investment. So keep investing, and I guarantee you. You'll win at something. Something good is going to happen for you. I promise you. All right. So anyway, let me finish up. I gotta go check on the furniture. I told y'all that. By the way, we're doing a financial slumber party, and I think I'm gonna invite my wife for this one. This is gonna be on relationship and wealth wars. This is when love and money and power collide. So we're gonna go into the science of love and money on the next financial slumber party, which is on the 14th. Here's the link if you want to take a look, or you can also just sign up and do a membership at financialslumberparty.com. So you can either come to the one-time event, or you can sign up and become a member. We do the financial slumber party once a month, and or about once every 4 to 6 weeks. And basically, it's where we get together about 11 o'clock at night, or maybe 10:30, something like that. We play music, have fun, and we learn finance. So it's like fun finances and whatever shenanigans come out of my mouth that particular day. But and all the slides, all the training is yours for life. And you sign up one time, you can bring your whole family, and it's a great way to party a little bit and make some money and figure out how to make our next economic move. So feel free to click on that link, or you can also go to financialslumberparty.com. And I want to say thank you to Vanessa. I didn't acknowledge you, Vanessa. Vanessa's on our team. She's actually in the chat, and I just saw her there. So sorry I didn't mention you earlier. And if you have any questions about anything you have going on in the Black Business School, then you can talk to Vanessa. Also on the 9th, we're getting together for stock options. So if you want to learn more about that, it's a great way to generate income. drboyceprime.com is the URL. Prime stands for passive recurring income machine. So stock options, in my view, are the best way to make extra money. I promise you, you're going to love it. All right. So have a good day, everybody. God bless you. I will see you soon. And I'm going to go check on the furniture. See y'all later. Bye bye.